Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. Our victim of the hour is Eric Fier. He's the CEO of SilverCrest Metals. SilverCrest 2.0, one could say, having delivered a great silver mine, sold the company, made a bunch of money for shareholders. Eric's out to do it again. And full disclosure, I owned this stock last year. It was a big success for us, out of the gate, made a bunch of money. I am no longer long, and the stock is no longer as cheap as when I first bought it, but he keeps finding more silver. So let me hand it over to Eric. Tell us what you're doing, and why should we buy your stock now?
Well, great for having to be back onto the show. SilverCrest continues its success story in Sonora, Mexico, on its Las Chispas project. It's all about grade. We all know that grade is king. This is one of the highest grade silver deposits in the world. There's very few of those out there these days. And this has really given us a lot of attention in the market. Some of the things that we've done over the last year are to put out 3 resource estimations, which is unheard of most of the time, but we're quite an aggressive group, and we do things systematic, and we've had a lot of success. So with these 3 resources, we're now at 108 million ounces silver equivalent. This is about 700 grams per ton, which is quite high grade. Again, silver equivalent. When I use silver equivalent, I use 75-1, and this just is gold and silver. There's no base metals associated with this. So these are veins. There's currently counted 30 veins on the property. They're 1 to 5 meters wide, and they go for anywhere from 100 meters out to 3 kilometers long. And of the 30 veins, 10 of those veins are in resource. The resources are in indicated and inferred. And where do we want to go from today? With the 108 million, we want to get things into reserves. So we're doing a lot of infill drilling. We're currently we just put out a preliminary economic assessment. The economics are quite impressive. The potential for free cash flow in the near future is very impressive too. Some of the numbers, NPV US dollars at current prices are anywhere from 450 to 500 million dollars. The IRR is anywhere from 75 to 100%. So these are quite impressive numbers for the industry, and we're got 16 drills running on site today. There's over 350 people working on the property. That's broken into the 16 drills and support for those. We are also developing underground. So we've driven about 800 meters to date with an underground contractor from Mexico. And we have actually broken into an area, we call it Area 51. It's based on drill hole 51, which was a discovery hole for the area, and that was 3.5 meters of 8 kilos silver equivalent. So
I remember that.
Yeah, we're getting pretty spoiled here also, and throwing around kilo type numbers. One of the recent things that have happened is with driving this underground development, we've hit Area 51. It's called the Bobby Canora vein in the Area 51 zone, and we are now faced up in numbers that are unheard of in today's industry. They were very sought after by the Spaniards in the 1700s. We're picking up material off of our stockpile that's coming from underground of over 100 kilos per ton silver equivalent. This is 10% volume of silver. These are that 100 kilos per ton is about equivalent to $75,000 per ton. And we're located just north of the Santa Elena mine, which we discovered. To give you a comparison, they're putting through their mill 170 to 200 grams per ton, and they're making free cash flow. So you can just think of the multiples here. So we're aggressively pursuing underground development. We're stockpiling for future processing. And just recently we've obtained our operating permit, which was a major milestone, definitely in Mexico and definitely moving the project forward. That permit allows us to construct and produce at a maximum capacity of 3,000 tons per day, underground mine, conventional milling, which is quite impressive. So, and we're still probably, I would say, about a year away from construction. Having this operating permit is quite critical to us, and it'll be critical to the financing of the project.
Well, that's a really good overview, and there's so many different questions I have from there. But let's start with the last one, just because that's so critical. You have an operating permit. Is that everything, or is there an explosive permit or a water? Is there any last thing after you build the mine before you can actually turn the switch on and go?
With the operating permit, there's 30 conditions. They're mostly around environmental protection. Okay, so you have to fulfill 30 conditions, and those are setting up environmental monitoring programs, environmental surveillance. There's norms in Mexico, just like there is all over the world, that you have to operate at. So those all have to all be set up. There's policies to go in place. Besides that, that is the major permit, but besides that permit, there's 22 more permits that you got to do. Now remember that we've already done this before, next door at the Santa Elena mine. So these are very quite familiar to us. The 22, just to give you a basic idea, this is definitely the explosives permit. So we've already applied for that. We're probably within 35 to 45 days of receiving that. We have been operating under a temporary permit, which is a construction permit, not an operating permit. So that's how we're driving underground currently.
Right.
But we put in, and we hope to obtain our general operating permit, which will be for the life of the mine also. Okay.
Okay. So there's still some boxes to tick. But one critical point I want to zoom in on. This was a question I was also going to ask later, but since we're on the subject, you know, the AMLO thing has a lot of people worried about investing in Mexico. You received this permit under the new AMLO bureaucracy, yes?
Definitely.
Okay, and is there any sign of slowdowns there or differences under the new administration?
We've seen nothing. There's been a lot of rhetoric, there's been a lot of discussions, but there's been no change in the Mexico laws that are impacting us. And definitely us getting an operating permit is very encouraging for that administration. So positive for us, and we're good to go.
Okay, so let's go back to the rocks then. That's good to know that we're seeming to be having, at least it's never easy, but at least there's no immediate impediment in the way. You have up to $500 million in NPV. What's the market cap right now of the company?
We're bouncing anywhere between, and I think Canadian too here. so Canadian-wise, we're at around 550, 550 million. So
given the foreign exchange, you're still at a slight discount, but not much. But you haven't built the mine yet. So why should anybody buy the stock if you seem fully valued for what you have?
Well, number one, it's a great asset. Okay, so there's very few of these types of assets worldwide. So it's all about the grade and high margin. So if you go look at our preliminary economic assessment, it's filed publicly. You'll see that free cash flow is quite impressive at even lower prices than today. And those are $100 to $150 million in free cash flow for the first 4 years. So you got to look at that kind of cash flow, and that is very attractive not only to us but also people that may be thinking about acquiring us. So there is some tension there about us getting acquired. So if you want to just go with a play of potentially, as far as your investors go, potentially getting acquired, there should be a premium with that. So there's that play that's ongoing. But the big story here is about growth. So those 16 drills that I mentioned before.
It's Vancouver.
Yeah, there you go. Those 16 drills that I mentioned before, half of those drills are working on expansion. So this is two stories at play here. One is operations and one is continued exploration. Again, remember I said there's 10 veins in resource. That means there's 20 more veins still to go. That's 20 more stories to tell and 20 more potential discoveries to be made.
Okay, well, let's talk about that story for a second, because not all, but a big chunk of the value here is Area 51, where we have a large volume of fairly consistently thicker, high-grade mineralization. It's the crown jewel here. It's what really makes it obvious this is going to be a mine. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But almost everything else is not quite as thick or not quite as consistent. So Are there more Area 51s out there? Is there periodicity that could be tested, or is it just about adding, high-grade bits in here to the crown jewel around the crown, or what's the real potential here?
Well, we're certainly looking for another Area 51.
Haven't tagged into one yet?
No, haven't tagged into one
we
yet.
got that clear.
Yep, yeah. I mean, the veins that we see right now that we're working on are anywhere from 1 to 3 meters wide. Call them 2 meter average, okay? But they're quite high grade again. The Babicanora Norte vein, which is next to the Babicanora vein, I mean, its average width is 0.8, but it's 2 kilos. So you can take a lot of dilution when you're playing with that.
You can forget a little bit there.
You got it. Yeah. So, and that vein, we're currently working on expanding that vein. And again, what we're seeing is 1 to 2 meters wide type. There's a little story in the background that's going on too. So when we drove the decline into the Babicanora vein, Area 51 zone, we hit what's called the Vista vein. So you can go look at it in the wall right now, and people will look at it and say, well, it's not really wide. It's about 1 meter wide. But then you take a piece of the vein off, and it's running 2 kilos. And it's right there. So this is all incremental.
Is it like just a seam of galena in the wall or something?
No, it's not galena, it's argentite. Yeah. So there's very, very little base metal at the level that we're working at.
Okay, so half the 16 drills are working on expansion.
Yeah.
Presumably the other half are defining the deposit. Yeah. And how much is above ground, how much is underground? And in particular, I'm interested to know of the underground drilling. And I'm going to trust you to tell me the truth, right? Is it confirming the model? Now that you're in there and presumably can drill it up close and personal, are we seeing what we hoped for? Better, worse, about, close?
Yep. Okay. So of the 16 drills, 15 of them are on surface. Okay. One's underground. Okay. And we're going to be moving more over the next couple of months underground as we get more area to put those drills. So what we're seeing is very similar to what we experienced at Santa Elena. So you come up with a inferred resource, you come in and you do infill drilling to make it into measured and indicated so you can get into reserves, okay? And what you see is you move ounces around. So instead of having high grade in one area, it gets moved to the left or the right or up or down, and the low grade gets moved around too, okay? So we've seen that. What we're seeing though, that's from just a high grade sense, the geography of the vein or the location of the vein.
Because all of this has lower grade halo. I mean, your cutoff is
150 grams per ton. Yeah. So you get this halo. So what we're actually seeing, and we put out some news recently that showed when we went underground with the decline and we actually hit the vein, and then we compared it to the model. The vein itself was about 1.9 kilograms per ton, silver equivalent, and the model was 1 gram per ton, or 1 kilo.
Okay.
1 kilo. Yeah, 1 kilo per ton.
This is the main Babicanora vein.
That's the main Babicanora vein. So we drove 35 meters along the vein, and we compared it to the resource model that we had developed. And there was a large difference there, positive difference for us. So maybe it's just that area. You got to do a lot more work.
Sure.
But this is all positive. One of the other things.
Sorry, while you're there, that drive along there, was it fairly consistent width? There was a lot of pinching and swelling that averaged out to those numbers.
No, it was consistent. So when we hit the vein, you hit it going to the south, so you could turn west. You could turn west or east. Okay, when you're doing that, we turn west. It was pretty consistent, about 3.5 meters wide. Okay. And then we turn to the right or to the east, and it narrowed down to about 2 meters, 2.5 meters. Okay, but overall it was pretty consistent. And what you saw was something that we didn't see in the core. There was actually a brecciated clay zone in the middle of the vein. So when we drilled it, we didn't recover that. We went right through it.
And did that run?
And it runs really high grade, Yeah. So you got about anywhere from 0.5 meter to 1 meter that you just blew right through when you were core drilling, and now you got additional ounces there.
Because the clay would dissolve in the water. The fluids for the drill would just wash all that away.
That's right. Yeah. So it's very and you got to remember that we're drilling these holes about 300 to 400 meters away. So by the time you get to that zone, to miss a half a meter to a meter is pretty easy to do. Okay.
Do they deviate much?
No, deviate. I mean, our contract requires the driller to be less than 5% deviation, or 5 degree.
Or you don't pay for the hole?
Or we don't pay for the hole. There you go.
Okay.
So it's so the discrepancy, the positive reconciliation that we're seeing may be partially due to this vein or this zone
material,
that was missed in the core drilling.
That's very interesting.
So we need to do a lot more work around this. We planned for the rest of the year we're going to drive about 2 kilometers more underground. Of that, 50% is targeting to be in the vein development and stockpiled on the surface.
But the overall goal is to make drilling bays and drill the thing off from underground?
Well, we're getting pretty close to being drilled out. So our drill centers and our target from the work that we've done should be anywhere between 25 to 35 meters. We're going to do some close space drilling, and we're actually going to do some test mining.
Bulk sample?
So that's fine. Yeah. We don't necessarily need to do a bulk sample as people think of a bulk sample for metallurgical test work. We've already sent a couple of tons in to do that metallurgical test work. So we're well ahead of the game from a feasibility standpoint on the metallurgy. Metallurgy is showing plus 90% silver and gold. Gold up to 99% recoveries that we're getting in some, and silver up to 95 to 96% recoveries. So these are impressive.
Yeah, that's
recoveries
really good.
itself.
Usually you have to trade one off over the other, and to
Yeah.
be able to get both is very good.
Yeah, one of the surprises for me for the whole deposit at Las Chispas, and we didn't see this at Santa Elena again next door, is the gravity recovery. So I was, my chief operating officer, Pierre Boudouin, he came to me and said, let's try some gravity. I said, okay, Pierre, maybe 10%, maybe 15%. And we got these numbers back, and there were 30 to 40% recoveries on gold and silver both that were coming in to concentrate.
Metallic silver in there? Or?
Yeah, metallic silver. There's a lot of electrum,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
there you go. So that's your gold and your silver component. And from a ratio standpoint, it's about 100 silver to 1 gold. Okay. So that's been pretty consistent.
Like the gold-silver ratio today.
You got it. Yeah.
Maybe it's your fault.
Yeah, that's it. We're driving that market.
All right, okay. So, and in terms of the new discoveries, you've got new veins maybe. Are we changing the design at all, the mine plan? I mean, you had that nice little valley in the middle where you could have a central facility to reach all these different areas. Is that still the plan?
That's still the plan. There's no change there. Anything that we find, and there's no open pit potential that we've seen so far, will be to depth. If there is a vein under the plant site, we know that. We've already drilled it. We call it the fluorite vein, okay? But it's going to be, if there's grade in the fluorite vein below the plant site, we did some condemnation drilling there, it would be 100 to 150 meters deep. So.
All right. Okay, so milestones going forward. What can shareholders and potential shareholders look forward to from SilverCrest during the remainder of this year?
Well, we've just announced that we're doing a financing. And most of that financing is pre-construction financing. You have to look at the use of that proceeds for underground development and more drilling and to complete our feasibility study.
Is that open to retail, or is that a broker deal?
That was open to retail. It's already closed.
Okay.
Right. There you go.
Never mind.
So it was a $22 million Canadian financing, had a green shoe of 15%. And then SSR Mining, who's a strategic partner, they decided to keep their 9.9%, so they're putting in money to also into the deal. Okay, so it'll be a gross value of about $30 million. We currently have $25 million in the bank, so we're going to have $50 to $55 million in the bank when we close in August. Okay, plenty of money to run our programs, and also extra money for the construction decision and going into construction and that. So the milestones are, we're currently working on our feasibility study, so look for that to be announced in H1.
But sorry, you keep exploring, you keep finding,
Sure.
darn it, you keep finding more silver.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line in the sand to make a feasibility study?
Well, the target right now is somewhere between 75 and 100 million ounces in reserves by the end of the feasibility study. So that's where you're drawing the line. Okay, which is quite impressive to get into a reserve and to get into a mine plan for a narrow vein mining scenario. Okay, I mean that's a 8 to 10 year mine life that you'd be running at, and
3,000 tons a day or something.
yeah, well, we're looking at 1,500 to 2,000 tons per day. So that's 10 to 15 million ounces silver equivalent per year in production. And the PEA suggested that that would be at about $6 cash cost per silver equivalent ounce. Okay, so that's
And
front
sorry,
end.
just again, the equivalent, it's all gold. There's
All gold.
No
Yeah.
copper, no
Nope.
lead, zinc,
Nope.
nothing.
No, we are starting to see that at depth. So there is potential for polymetallics at depth.
That was going to be the next question.
There
Is
you go.
this a gold-silver zone, and is there a polymetallic or
Yep.
more polymetallic rich?
We see an increase in lead, zinc, and copper to depth. Okay, yeah, the veins themselves, the precious metal veins themselves, are 0 to 300 meters. Okay, when we go below 300, 350 to 400, we start seeing those base metals come in. Okay, and they could be economic. We don't know yet. A lot more drilling to be done. Really, you're working on the low-hanging fruit right now, above 300 meters.
Sure.
And once you get some underground infrastructure in, then you can start going to depth and save some money on drill costs.
Potential near-term upside. I mean, that certainly has worked out for MAG to make
You bet. Yeah.
a big discovery. Whoa,
That's
where
right.
do we find more? Right underneath our deposit, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, moving forward for the rest of the year, plan on seeing, several more news releases around expansion, around new discoveries. I mean, we're drilling on 5 new targets right now, okay? And we're hitting vein. There's a lot of visual indication that there's going to be opportunity around these veins. And those are outside of any resource that we currently have.
So the first deliverable report would be a new resource on which, that would trigger the feasibility line in the sand? Or
Well,
would that
we're already 3 months into the feasibility study.
Okay.
So we're going to do 2 internal resources between now and the end of the year, 2019. Okay, and I call them internal. We may decide to publicize those, but we need those to check us to make sure that our reserve numbers are being justified as we work forward with the feasibility study. I don't see any major change. I mean, Bobby Canora vein is the foundation, and that's going to drive the mining schedule along with Bobby Norte and a few of the other veins. It's going to drive the first 5 years, basically, in the Bobby Canora area. So.
All right, it all sounds good. I appreciate you sitting still for these obnoxious in-the-pit questions, but I always have to ask, if this is so good, how much do you believe in it personally? How much of your own money have you put in there? How much skin in the game do you have?
So when I founded SilverCrest Metals after SilverCrest Mines, and that was 2015, I put in about $500,000. So I was the second largest shareholder at that time, coming out of the transaction with First Majestic. Since then, I put in about another $500,000. So I'm $1 million in. But this was early on, and I own. From shares, warrants, options, I have 6 to 7% of the company. So definitely that's me personally. The rest of the team that I have, including my directors and a few friends and family, that's about 15% of the company. So there's definitely skin in the game. So.
All righty. Have you sold any shares to build a swimming pool or something?
I have not sold anything.
Not a single share.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Great story.
Thanks again for having me on.